G'day guys, I've just returned from the Australian and New Zealand Team Championships where my team, Team Victoria, took home the gold and won this absolutely monstrously large trophy, as well as medals and bragging rights and accolades. It was an absolute fantastic event, and what I want to do today is break down the list that I took and also talk about each round, which one of our players played against who, how that worked for us, and also break down a little bit of detail about my individual games and what worked and what didn't work for me as the World Leaders player on our team. So with that being said, let's jump straight into it.
Look for the Blood God.
G'day guys, I just wanted to take a second to talk to you about the exciting Blog for the Blood God Fundraiser Raffle, where you can buy tickets for your chance to win a set of neoprene objective markers and a pack of 50 Blog for the Blood God dice. If you'd like to buy some tickets, click on the link in the description of this video. You can scroll down and view the prizes there, and if you'd like to buy some tickets, select buy tickets, select how many tickets you would like to buy, select that you are over 18 and that you agree with the terms, and then I would recommend deselecting the subscription because who needs unnecessary emails, and then you can proceed to fill out your details. If you are an Australian resident, you will be required to select your state. If not, just select any state. It doesn't particularly matter as long as the street address and details of postage are correct as per above. And then you can go through, proceed on payment, and then it will submit your ticket sales. The reason we've decided to do a raffle in order to raise funds is because this year I have been named as captain for Team Australia for the WTC World Team Championships of Warhammer 40k. This is a once-in-a-lifetime, really exciting opportunity for me. However, as an Australian, that trip is extremely expensive, and unfortunately, life does what it does and has thrown a bunch of unforeseen expenses my way in the terms of veterinary bills for my very sick cat. So any help that we can get to send me to Europe to represent Australia would be greatly appreciated. And also, if there's any money left over at the end, it will go towards improving the quality and frequency of the content here on YouTube. So I very much appreciate any support that you are prepared to give, and I look forward to rewarding that with some exciting prizes. If this does well, we'll do multiple of these raffles because I've got plenty of stuff to give away, and I really do want to show some support for the community that supports me so well. So thank you very much for your consideration. If you'd like to buy a ticket, links are in the description below, and let's get into today's video. Alrighty guys, first place to start I think would be to just talk about the team lineup, my list, and what my fellow teammates from Team Victoria managed to bring home. So let's have a look. We had Adam Camilleri on Astra Militarum. This was your standard indirect spam with some Bullgrins, your pretty traditional, Astra Militarum list. We had Boyd Morale. He was on a Necron list with no Catan, just a ton of what are they called? The Wraiths and a bunch of Immortals to do damage and control those objectives. A really, really strong list. I was on World Eaters. We'll go through that in a moment. We had Dylan Cowan on a Space Marines Ironstorm list. Lots of tanks, lots of punch, lots of damage there, and also quite a durable list. We had Jeremy Martino, one of the Team Australia players. He was running Thousand Suns. He had Magnus. He had a big unit of 10 Terminators, the Scarab Occult, and then a bunch of other small pieces to play, the objectives and the missions, etc. We had Matt Morrisoli on Chaos Knights. He was running pretty much your traditional Chaos Knights list with 6 Carnivores, 5 Brigands, a Stalker, and some Chaos Demon allies. So really standard but really powerful Chaos Knights list. Then we had Reese Cunningham. He's also a member of Team Australia this year. He was running an Adeptus Sororitas list with a whole bunch of different units. He had 3 units of Arcoflagellants, units of Repentia that were doing a lot of damage. He had Morven Val with the Suits unit. Some really, really powerful components to his list. And then we rounded out the team with Stuart Trainer, who was running Grey Knights. Now, he had a slightly different list than what you've probably seen in traditional teams events, where he had 3 Dread Knights, 1 Grandmaster, and then he had a big unit of Purifiers and a big unit of Strikes. And that was to give him a little bit more play in the missions and give him the ability to sort of maneuver around terrain and those sorts of things. So that's the team. Let's just have a quick look at my list for you. And pull it up here. So my list was a very off-meta World Leaders list. So you can see here it was Angron, Lord Invocatus. We had the World Leaders Lord on Juggernaut, Then we had a unit of Jackals, a unit of 5 Berserkers with no character attached to these guys. And then we had 2 units of regular 8-bound it by 3, 3 units of 3 Exalted 8-bound, and then 1 big Terminator squad. Now, it's worth noting at this point that this event happened before the balanced data slate points cost. So these are the old points costs, and I still took a unit of 10 Terminators. And this was specifically for certain matchups, where the idea is that a unit of 6 Exalted 8-bound, which is the more popular meta pick, is vulnerable to things like Death Guard, Custodes, those sorts of things, and it actually blows out those matchups. Whereas the 10 Terminators, even though you're spending quite a few more points, you're actually making that unit significantly tougher because it's got the 2-up save, the 4-up invulnerable save, and there's 10 bodies instead of 6. And basically what this means is that you can charge a unit of Plague Marines, and if they fight first, they're going to kill a couple of Terminators, but you're going to have enough left in your unit to wipe them out. Whereas that doesn't necessarily work with the Exalted 8-bound. It also means that if you're going to charge somebody who's going to overwatch you, it's fine. You can absorb the overwatch and still hit them hard enough that they're going to die. And then there's a few other pieces as well. The shooting is also very good, and we'll talk about that when we get into the matchups. But that was the idea behind the Terminators. Then the 3 units of Exalted 8-bound, basically 2 of those would get Scout Move from Lord of Invocatus, and then the 3rd one would just Stage. And then basically I'd be Scout Moving those, Scout Moving the regular 8-bound, Scout Moving Invocatus himself. So having a really strong presence from the first turn, and then the Terminators would rapid ingress in turn 2, and then go in and do their damage. So that more or less rounds out the list. The reason for the unit of Khorne Berserkers with no character attached was that often you'll find that when you have that scout move, people are going to put a unit like scouts or something like that on a central objective to try to screen you out and prevent you from doing that alpha strike damage. So basically what I was doing with the Berserkers was, if they did that, I would then be able to throw a unit of Berserkers out, which is almost always going to be enough to kill a unit of Tactical Marines down to maybe 1 guy left, or possibly even just wipe them. Units of Scouts, all of those sort of small annoying pieces that they would put out to try to stop you from being able to secure that objective. And also, because the Berserkers are OC2, if they did put something on an objective and it was something that was scary, you couldn't charge it because you're not going to kill it with Jackals or whatever, you could actually just put those Khorne Berserkers on the objective and have more OC than your opponent and just take it off them that way. And then in their turn, if they shoot your Berserkers, you're going to Blood Surge into the thing that you were just contesting the objective for. So the small unit of Berserkers was really good, and then you've got your standard sort of smattering of characters. So that more or less sums up my list. Just going to go back now so that we can look at... Surely I can go back. Oh no, here. So that's the team lineup. That's my list. Now let's have a look at the rounds, and basically what I'll do is I'll break down who versus who, and also I'll break down what my games were, what my matchups were like, and how my list performed. So let's go to round 1. So we, Victoria, played against Team Western Australia. Now, it's worth noting that Team Western Australia has multiple Team Australia players on that team, so a very strong team, and they are also the team that placed 2nd overall. So this was almost like the top table game from the event happening in that first round. So we had Matt Morosoli played his Chaos Knights into Adeptus Custodes and got a 15-point win. I played my World Eaters into Lachlan Riggs Grey Knights and I got 0 points. He absolutely ran through me. Jeremy played Thousand Suns into Necrons. He also got an 8-point loss, but that's okay. We predicted that. Necrons are a very difficult army to topple. Stewie played his Grey Knights into the Eldari and got a 14-point win. Dylan put the Space Marines into their Chaos Knights and got a 14-point win. Boyd used his Necrons to secure a 20-point win into their Thousand Suns. Reese put his Adeptus Sororitas into their Guard and got a 15-point win. And then Adam Camilleri on stream, on the Risky Rollers stream, he got 1-point loss out of their Blood Angels. So it was an absolutely brutal round. We got an 87-point win to their 73-point loss, so it was actually relatively close to a draw, but we managed to sort of get those points at the tail end. And basically with this one, when looking at their lineup, we all knew that their Grey Knights list was going to be a problem for our team. Not many people on our team had the capacity to beat it, and if they did, they were predicting very small wins or potentially just a draw. And knowing the way Grey Knights work, it could flip at any moment and become a disaster. So when we were looking at the rest of the team, we realized that I didn't have a lot of really good matchups. There were a lot of armies that I was worried about because I can't beat Custodies with World Eaters. Guards hard, Grey Knights hard, Sisters is hard. You know, there's a lot of matchups that are very hard for me. So basically what happened is when they put up their Grey Knights, we basically threw me into it. And, you know, just knew that I think we put me up knowing that I didn't have any good matchups, and then when they put in their Grey Knights, we selected it to pull it out of the pool, knowing that I was going to lose the game, but knowing that pretty much everyone was going to lose the game anyway, and we're better off protecting them to get wins on their tail end of the pairings. So we put me in. I was hoping to get some points. I'd played practice games against Grey Knights and usually would get between 5 and 10 victory points, you know, based on the WTC scoring. So it was generally like it was always going to be a loss, but I was hoping to get some points. But Lockie absolutely ran through me. It was a brutal game. Basically, what I did is I picked a really heavy table. I picked a really heavy table because I was the put up. And then basically what I did is I hid everything in one big ruin, and then I put out some small pieces so that he couldn't teleport in and shoot all of my 8-bound and my characters and Angron and all that, right? So I had this little nugget hidden from all of his Dread Knights. But then he basically dropped Drago down and ripped a 14-inch charge from Deep Strike. And what I'd done is I'd basically sequenced my 8-bound so that there was, you know, a big 3 to 4 inch gap between each unit, so that when he drops in 9 inches away, the probability of him charging that back unit is very low. So I was like, cool, he can drop in, he can hit this front unit, but then he's going to kill that, and then I'm going to be able to fight back, right? But unfortunately, he dropped in, and then with the plus 3 inches that Drago gets, he rolled an 11, so he got a 14-inch charge move, which allowed him to move all the way around. And because I was in a ruin, he actually couldn't place within base contact of me, which meant he was able to swing all the way around, and he basically blew up all my 8-bound, and it was a big problem then. So once he did that, the Terminators had to rapid ingress to fight back. Angron jumped in to fight back. We wiped out his Terminator unit, but then all of the Dread Knights just collapsed in on me and rolled me up. So absolutely devastating game, that one. But the team got the win because I was able to jump on that grenade, which is something I'm more than happy to do. So that was round 1. Then we're going to go into round 2 here. So round 2, Victoria, let's see. Team Victoria into Team Northern Territory. So this one we got a 135-point win into their 25-point loss. So this was an absolute blowout. We destroyed the Northern Territory. We had Adam Camilleri got a 15-point win with his Guard into their Death Guard. Boyd got a 20-point win with his Necrons into their Eldari. Dylan got a 18-point win with his Space Marines into their Guard. I got a 14-point win with my World Eaters into their Sisters of Battle. Our Sisters of Battle player Reese got a 20-point win into their Chaos Space Marines. Jeremy got a 19-point win with his Thousand Sons into their Tyranids. Stewie got a 17-point win with his Grey Knights into their Orcs. And then Matt Morrisella got a 12-point win with his Chaos Knights into their Custodes. So the game that I played was World Eaters versus Sisters of Battle, and this is actually one of the harder matchups for the World Eaters because they can force you to fight against little 2-man squads of Crusaders, which is really, really annoying. And they can also fight on death, so even when you charge into a Repentia and you kill them, they fight on death and kill you. So it can be a very, very difficult matchup for the World Eaters. And in this matchup, the Terminators absolutely shone. They did amazing. So glad that I included the Terminators instead of the Exalted 8-bound, because basically what happened is he did a first turn, he basically spread everything out. I played really conservative in the first turn, and then I deep strike the Terminators in and use the bolters to kill a unit of Repentia. And that way they can't fight on death, they can't do anything, I've just killed them. And then I made a lucky 9-inch charge granted into a unit of Arcoflagellants, and the Terminators killed probably about half of the unit. And then basically the Arcoflagellants can't hurt Terminators because they're AP 0. So he's just flailing away, doing no damage. And then over the next couple of turns, the Terminators then picked up all the Arcoflagellants and were free to then go on and do other things. So that Terminator unit did amazing work. One of the other things that I did really interestingly in that game was he basically had like a multiple units of 2 Crusaders screening out one of his big combat bricks. And what I did is I charged a unit of regular 8-bound in and tagged 2 units of Crusaders and a unit of Arcoflagellants. Then Angron jumped over and charged the unit from behind. And then because I had tagged those things, he couldn't heroically intervene into Angron and then use 1 CP to force Angron to fight Crusaders. And that meant that Angron was basically able to sweep and pick up an entire unit of sisters with characters in it. And then those 8-bound then died, but who cares? They've done their job. So that was really interesting as well. So there was a few things that went my way in that game. There was definitely some tricks that needed to be played, and that got me the win. So let's have a look at round 3 now. Round 3. I'm trying to remember who round 3 was into. I feel like it was South Australia. Round 3. Oh no, ACT. So the Australian Capital Territory. This is Canberra. So we actually got a draw into them, and we were on the losing side of the draw, which is interesting. So we got a 78 into their 82. So it was a very, very close round. If we had dropped a couple more points, we would have lost. So we had Jeremy got a 6-point loss with his Thousand Suns into their Space Wolves. This Space Wolves player was the top performing individual for the event. So he did really, really well. Dylan got a loss with his Space Marines into their Eldari. Matt Morosoli got a draw with his Chaos Knights into their Death Guard. Reese Cunningham, who was arguably our top performer, he got a 19-point win with his Sisters into their Necrons. Boyd got a 10-point draw with his Necrons into their Grey Knights. Stewie got a 10-point draw with his Grey Knights into their Tau Empire. I got a 15-point win with my World Eaters into their Chaos Knights. And Adam Camilleri got a 1-point loss with his Guard into their Tyranids. So a really, really close round. Every point really mattered in this one, which was a consistent theme throughout the event. There's lots of really close rounds. My game, World Eaters into Chaos Knights, was an interesting one. Basically, my opponent, he was kind of drip feeding me one knight at a time, which was fine because I was able to just trade it for one unit of 8-bound. And I think his plan was that in the later turns of the game, he was going to jump out onto multiple objectives and score a big tail end primary. However, basically what happened is because he was only sending out one unit at a time, I was responding with one, but then I was pushing up a little closer. And then he was moving back so that I didn't collapse in on him. And then I was able to keep that trading game up. And when the Terminators dropped in, again, they did amazing value. So they basically dropped in, did some shooting, killed some Nurglings, then charged, they rapid ingressed in, then they charged 2 knights, a Carnivore and a Brigand, and killed both. Then basically in his turn, he's charged a Carnivore and a Carnivore in, and then I've just used the -1 damage strat, and they've done not much damage. The 4-up invulnerable saves, I think he killed 2, and then in his turn, I killed that Carnivore, and then we went into the next turn, and I was able to kill more stuff. So it was absolutely brutal, and it was, you know, the Terminators were fantastic. Whereas I feel like if it was Exalted 8-bound, first of all, I wouldn't have been able to kill those Nurglings, which would have meant less no prisoners points, and also I probably wouldn't have survived the Carnivore's charge with as many models. Because, like, when he charged, he tank shocks, you know, and the tank shock's going to kill probably 1 to 2, you know, kill 1.5 Exalted 8-bound, which is a problem. Whereas he only killed, like, 1 Terminator, 1.5 Terminators, and when you've got 10 of them, that's significantly less impactful. And then I was able to hit back with +1 to hit because I'd taken casualties, which means those Terminators on the clapback are very, very dangerous. So yeah, that was a really good game. I was really happy with the way the army performed. He basically ignored Angron, so I was able to send Angron out to kill a Carnivore off of an objective on this, like, off to the side of the table. And then because Angron was so far away from, like, the rest of my army, he didn't want to send resources that way to go deal with Angron, so he kind of ignored Angron, and that allowed Angron to just turn by turn take out one Carnivore, one Brigand. Meanwhile, you've got a unit of 8-bound goes and takes out one by one, and as a result, I ended up overwhelming him towards the end of the game. So yeah, it was a really interesting game, and I had a ton of fun. And I'm really glad because I feel like my 15-point win there was one of the things that contributed to the team winning that round, because a lot of other players were just pulling back draws. So getting that win, getting those points on the table was fantastic. Alright, now it was a 6-round event, so let's go into day 2 and have a look at the pairings for this round, for this day. But basically at this stage we're feeling good. You know, we've got 2 wins and a draw. We got a win against Western Australia, which is the main thing that we were worried about. So we're feeling good. We're pretty pumped up. And now let's have a look at, this was the Team Victoria versus South Australia. So we got a 90-point win, our team, into the 70-point loss for South Australia. But this was another real nail-biter. It was a really close round. So we had Matt Morrisoli's Chaos Knights into Tau Empire, got a 16-point win. Dylan Cowan, he had a Space Marines versus Black Templar, so a Space Marine off. And our Space Marines came out on top with a 12-point win. I got an 8-point loss with my World Eaters into their Sisters of Battle, which was the expected outcome. We knew that the Sisters was a tricky matchup, as I explained earlier, but yep, 8-point loss there. Stewie got a 12-point win with his Grey Knights into their Chaos Knights. Jeremy got a 9-point loss with his Thousand Sons into their Death Guard. Reese got a 20-point win with his Sisters into their Guard. Adam got a 9-point loss with his Guard into their Necrons. And Boyd got a 4-point loss with his Necrons into their Grey Knights. So yeah, real interesting round. There was some big swings in there that we didn't expect. We expected Boyd to do better with the Necrons, but we didn't expect Reese to do quite as well as he did with the Sisters. So there was some real ups and downs in that round, which was fantastic and made for a really exciting round. My game into their Sisters of Battle, coming off a fresh win on Sisters of Battle in the previous round, I was like, yep, I think I can do this. I know what I need to do. I've played this matchup a ton. It is really hard, but I think it can be done. This player was significantly more competent and more talented than my previous round opponent. Not any criticism on him, it's just that this guy was fantastic. And the mission was the one where the central objective is removed and there's only the 2 on the sides, which meant that the Sisters of Battle player didn't have to engage me on multiple fronts. And the primary was capped at 10. It was harder to get very big primary scores. And basically, this was one of the lowest scoring games of the event, where basically he would throw things out onto objectives, I would kill him off, so he would get his 2 points of primary, but then he would kill me off, so I would get my 2 points of primary, and we just kept doing that back and forth, denying each other primary, and scoring our tactical cards where we could, to the point where the whole game, I was looking like a 12-8 win to me. I was ahead by a couple points. I had a really good couple of turns of secondaries, and he had a couple of poor turns, so I was ahead. But as most World Eaters players will know, we often run out of resources quite fast. So he was throwing things onto an objective, I'd charge him to tag it off, he'd charge back on to tag me off, but he had more units, so he was able to keep that up for longer, and as a result, in that last battle round, he was able to flip it from a 12-8 win to me into a 12-8 win for him, by killing me off those objectives, getting on those secondaries, and sort of just getting a really big score in that last battle round. So a really, really awesome game, really awesome opponent, and we predicted it to be an 8-point loss to me, and I got exactly that 8-point loss. So I'm relatively happy with that result. So that was that round. That was round 4, I think. Yep. So now we're going to round 5. And at this stage, round 5, we're getting exhausted. The team's, pretty tired. So we had a big pep talk, and then we got stuck into the next round. And this one was back into Team Western Australia again. So we beat them in the first round. But unfortunately, this event had a weird podding system where basically they podded you based off previous results. So Team Victoria came second in the last ATC, and Team WA came third in the last ATC. So we were in that top pod. So we had to play each other on the day 1. But then they reshuffled the pods in day 2 to make sure that all of the people who had achieved the best results on day 1 had to verse each other for the to win the gold. And as a result, we had to play WA again. And we were a little nervous going into this because we were like, well, hang on, they now know what we can do to win. They know what our winning strategy is, but we don't know what theirs is. So they had a bit of an information advantage here. And we ended up getting a draw, 79 point to Team WA, and then an 81 point to Victoria. So we were on the winning side of the draw, but it was a draw again. So this is our second draw for the tournament. So we had Harrison's Adeptus Custodes into our Necrons, and we got the 11-point win. We had Courtney's Necrons into our Thousand Sons, and we got an 11-point win. We had their Thousand Sons into our Sisters Battle, and we got a 20-point win. We had their Guard into our Guard, so the mirror match, and we got an 11-point win. We had their Grey Knights into our Chaos Knights, and they got a 17-point win. So this is like I was saying earlier, we identified that Lockie Rig was going to be an absolute problem for our lineup. This time, instead of feeding me to it, we decided to put our Chaos Knights into it and see if they'd have a better crack at it. We had their Eldari into our Grey Knights, and we got a 14-point win there. We had their Chaos Knights into our Space Marines and got an 11-point win. And then we had their Blood Angels into our World Eaters, and again, they got a 20-point win out of me. Jordan absolutely ran through me with the Blood Angels. So this was a matchup that I was actually disappointed in the outcome. I thought we were going to be much closer to a draw. I had a feeling it was going to be a loss because the Blood Angels have a lot of tricks, but I was hoping that it was going to be much closer. And basically what happened is I spoke to a couple of the more experienced players during the pairings process, and I said, look, if you put me into the Blood Angels, I can make sure that my Blessings roll is Fights on Death, and I can just full send. And if he charges into me, chances are we kind of just both die. But if I charge into him, it's not necessarily the same thing. So that gives me a bit of an advantage. However, he has neg 1 damage on a lot of his big Death Company units, so that's going to be really hard for me to crack through. He has, the Sanguinor, who's able to drop in and then fight first and basically precision out characters and do a bunch of weird stuff. He's got a lot of tricks as well. So I said it's basically, I'm looking at a 10-10 draw. It could blow out in either direction, though. I asked whether or not I should play it cagey and just play for a small loss, or should I put the 4-up Fights on Death and just full send and pray for 4-ups and hope that we get the win that way. And the advice was basically looking at everybody else's pairings. Everybody else is looking pretty good, in which case it's worthwhile me taking the more risky play that might secure us a big win. Because given that we've had draws in the past, getting a big win would be really helpful in the overall placings of the event. So I basically did this exactly as I was advised. I put the 4-up Fights on Death, I sent everything out, did a bunch of stuff in the first turn, and then I didn't roll any 4-ups, and basically none of my stuff fought on death. And then the one thing that I did charge was he had a big unit of Death Company. I charged that with my Terminators. I killed it, but then he just spent 2 CP to fight on death and killed my Terminators in return. So it was actually the strategy that we had planned to use against him, he used against us with great effect. And because he didn't have to roll for it, he wasn't at the mercy of the dice, and I was. So, unfortunately, that was an absolute blowout, but luckily, the rest of the team did great work, picked up those big wins, and actually allowed us to draw this round, which prevented us from ending on a win and a draw, like a loss and a draw. We're now just on 2 draws, which gave us a pretty good position going into the final round. Alright, so the final round was against New Zealand North. So the New Zealand sent 2 teams, one from North Island, one from South Island. And we got an 88-point win into their 72-point loss. And again, this was another nail-biter. You can see that there's only a handful of points difference here. I played my World Eaters into their guard and got an 8-point loss, which was the predicted result. And we'll go through that in a minute. Our guard got a 16-point win into their Custodies. Our Necrons got an 8-point loss into their Blood Angels. Our Grey Knights got a 4-point loss into their Grey Knights in the mirror match. Our Chaos Knights got a 15-point win into their Chaos Knights in the mirror match. Our Thousand Sons got a 5-point loss into their Necrons in the that final round. Our Sisters got a 19-point win into their Thousand Sons. And our Marines got a 13-point win into their Sisters. So in this round, I played against their Astra Militarum, absolutely legendary bloke. And basically, the way that we figured out the Astra Militarum matchup was, if they go first, they definitely win. They probably 20 me. But if I go first, I can 20 them. Because I can basically get into those charges first turn, get up close, prevent them from being able to push out onto objectives, and also do heavy damage to them before I die. Whereas if they go first, they can just delete all my 8-bound. There's not much I can do to stop them. They can slow me down. They can make it really hard for me to make it into combat. And that can be absolutely devastating. So it really is a bit of a coin flip game. And basically I said to the pairings team as they were doing it, I was like, look, if you put me into the guard, I'm either going to bring you back 0 or 20, right? It's going to be one of those two. And it's all depends on how everybody else is going, on whether or not it's worth that pairing. And basically this was a pairing towards the tail end. We had got a bunch of positive matchups, so we were looking pretty good. So they were happy for me to take that coin flip. And then basically, when we rolled to see who goes first, he got the first turn. And I was like, oh no, I'm going to get another 0 points. Like that's so embarrassing. But I played as hard as I could, knowing that every point was going to matter. And I managed to do some really interesting stuff with stickying objectives and then screening out those objectives that I'd stickied so that he couldn't bring on his reserves to try and take it back. And that meant that I was able to secure 2 objectives for almost the entire game. And I was also able to send Angron in to do some pretty interesting stuff, blowing up units of Bullgrins, blowing up Demolisher, tank commanders. Angron did a lot of really good work. And the Terminators also did some fantastic work, dropping in and then killing a unit of Bullgrin and a Sentinel, and then basically absorbing an entire round of shooting. It took his entire army, an entire round of shooting, just to kill that one Terminator unit, and that meant that the rest of my army didn't get touched. He ended up shooting basilisks into him because he just had to kill those last couple of Terminators because they'd got chain fists and they're about to go into his tanks. So he was firing basilisks at them, which meant he wasn't hurting the movement characteristic of my 8-bound. It meant that he wasn't, killing the berserkers that were coming up that flank. There was some really interesting stuff there, and it was all down to the Terminators being such a durable unit. So that was a fantastic game, and I got 8 points. I was expecting to get none, maybe 3 or 4 points, but the World Leader's ability to sticky that objective and then screen it out so he can't go anywhere near it means that I'm just scoring those victory points. Even though I'm dead, I'm tabled, I'm still scoring a ton of victory points. So yeah, it was a really interesting game, a really solid last round, and that brought Victoria home to get the win. Team Western Australia came second, which is absolutely fantastic, and there was an absolutely stellar performance by the Team Australia players. So we had Matt Morosoli, Jeremy Martino, Reese Cunningham, Lachlan Rigg, Jordan Beresford, and Callum German, all on Team Australia, and they were split amongst Team Western Australia and Team Victoria, who were the 2 teams that came first and second. So I'm really, really happy with that, and that makes me feel very confident for what Team Australia is going to do when we head into the World Team Championships. So I'm absolutely thrilled with that, and yeah. So yeah, that more or less rounds out the event. It was an absolute killer of an event. Every round was an absolute nail-biter. The World Leaders didn't perform particularly well, however, I was thrown into hard matchups intentionally to try to sort of deal with what I could, because they were matchups that the rest of the team were going to struggle with, so I'm not too upset with the results. However, it is a bit disappointing that I wasn't able to bring home any of those big wins, which is something that World Leaders typically hunt. World Leaders are typically that thing that's like, it's going to lose to 6 of their people, but the 2 people that it beats, it destroys. Unfortunately, I didn't get any opportunities to bring home those big wins, which is something that I've historically done in the past, and something that I really enjoy doing, is going into those green matchups and just crushing them. But, it just wasn't to be. The pairings dictated that the best strategy for the team was for me to take these matchups and get as many points as I could, was the strategy. And I pushed for every single point. At no point did I roll over and be like, I guess I just lose. I pushed for every point. Unfortunately, some games, like the ones into the other Team Australia players, I wasn't able to secure them. But in other games, like the Sisters of Battle matchups, the Chaos Knights, and the Astra Militarum, I was able to bring home those points. So I'm pretty happy with the results. I'm extremely proud of my team. This is the best that Team Victoria has done in 7 years, and the previous best was under my captaincy last year. So we got silver last year, gold this year. So Team Victoria is ascending. We're doing absolutely fantastic, and I'm so proud of what we've been able to achieve as a community. And I'm so proud of the Western Australian boys and what they were able to achieve, having lost their first round and having that not break their spirits. They kept pushing, they came back, they got another crack at us, and then they managed to bring themselves into that silver medal position. Absolutely fantastic testament to the Australian willpower and the ability for their team to sort of pull their heads together and stay focused on task. So yeah, thanks for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed that. If you want more information on the Australian Team Championships, I'll put some links in the description of this video where you can find information on our website. And if you want more information on Team Australia, we've got a website there as well. So I'll make sure all of that information is in the links below. And yeah, thanks for tuning in. I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.
farmer community suffers from some of the most prohibitively expensive essentials in the world, especially Australian content creators. Every single day, Dean wants to create content, but he can't. Suffering from old, worn-out brushes, expensive model kits, and costly software and equipment he can't endure much longer. Just look at this dirty paint water. Would you drink this? Would you let your child? Even a small monthly donation can help provide Dean with clean paint water, basic tools for survival, and access to life-saving information and education. So please, follow the links in the description below and find out how you can sponsor a mad cunt like Dean today and end the suffering. Suffering that is cruel, unsustainable, and your fault.